Over just the past few months, we've seen headline after headline. A vice mayor in Florida allegedly killed by her husband. A respected physician dead in alleged murder suicide involving her estranged spouse. A black pastor allegedly killed by her husband. Another woman shot by an ex who couldn't let go. Different cities, different names, same deadly pattern. And too often, these are treated as isolated tragedies. A domestic dispute, a crime of passion. But let's call it what it is: violence, control, possession, and sometimes femicide. Today, we're leaning into a painful but necessary conversation: intimate partner violence, the alarming number of Black women whose lives have been taken by those who claim to love them, and the deeper wounds in our communities we often avoid discussing. But today, I want us to go deeper than the headlines. Because if we only talk about the act and not the roots, we may mourn tragedy without preventing the next one. Yes, violence is a choice. And yes, people who abuse must be held accountable. But if we care about prevention, we have to ask hard questions. What pain goes untreated? What trauma goes unnamed? What happens when wounded people never learn how to heal? Sometimes behind rage is untreated depression. Sometimes behind control is abandonment trauma. Sometimes behind jealousy is insecurity that has hardened into possession. And sometimes behind violence is a lifetime of emotional pain a man was taught never to acknowledge. Man up, be strong, handle it. And too often, pain unmanaged becomes pain projected.
There's a false narrative being shared about former Lieutenant Governor Fairfax, who just committed murder-suicide, killing his wife Serena, and Shamar Elkins, who recently killed 8 of his children. And that false narrative is this: Black men are in a current mental health crisis. That is farthest from the truth. The fact of the matter is this: Black men have always been in crises, whether it be financial, dealing with racial issues, psychological, physiologically. Black men are always under crises. The challenge that we see today, having counseled as a licensed mental health counselor hundreds of Black men, being a Black man myself, and having raised 2 young adult Black sons, the biggest challenge that I see coming on the horizon, and that's been going on, I would say, for the past maybe 20 years or so, is the levels of isolation and lack of accountability. In times of crises and instability, when the wisest voice you hear is your own, and when the only person that you're reasoning with is yourself to yourself, that normally leads to areas of disaster. And that's what we're seeing today. But make no mistake about it, Black men are not currently in a mental health crisis. Black men have always been under some levels of mental health crises. But the wonderful thing that we had back in the day was community. And within the community, it helped to build agency. But because of the isolation levels that we see today, that community has been eroded. I hope that makes sense. God bless.
That does not excuse abuse, but it may help explain what we need to confront. Because maybe being part of protecting Black women includes asking who is helping heal Black men before brokenness turns destructive. Why are warning signs minimized? Why do people ask, why didn't she leave? Instead of, why did he feel entitled to harm her? Why do we keep treating abuse like private business until it becomes public tragedy? And maybe the two hardest questions are these: who protects Black women and who helps heal Black men? Because these questions may be more connected than we admit. And let's be honest, many Black men are carrying grief they never named: father wounds, street trauma, depression hidden behind pride, humiliation never processed, relationship pain turned inward or outward. And because vulnerability is often mistaken for weakness, some suffer in silence until suffering comes out sideways through anger, through control, through violence. And by then, everybody loses.
The amount of Black women that have been murdered within this last month by their partners is very alarming, and we as a society need to do something. The same way we fight for other causes, we need to bring attention to this. We need to have healthy dialogue. There is no time for a blame game. We need to talk about solutions. What can we teach our young men that's growing up about emotional regulation, about relationships? I need to see a lot of men denounce this behavior and violence towards women, period. This is not a time for a blame game. How do we stop this from occurring?
But let me also speak clearly. If love feels like walking on eggshells, if affection comes mixed with threats, if control is disguised as protection, darling, that's not love. That is danger. And your life matters. Because leaving can be the most dangerous moment. And too many women have paid for trying to leave. Ah, these headlines are just not stories. They were women with laughter, plans, dreams, chairs now empty at family gatherings. And behind every headline is a family asking, could this have been prevented? Maybe, if red flags were taken seriously, if abuse wasn't minimalized, if mental health wasn't stigmatized, if healing was normalized, if intervention came before crisis. Maybe prevention looks like teaching boys emotional language beyond anger. Maybe it looks like counseling before conflict turns catastrophic. Maybe it looks like mentorship, community, faith spaces that addresses trauma, and redefining strength, because strength is not domination. Strength is self-awareness. Strength is saying, I am hurting. I need help. I don't want my pain to harm someone I love. That is strength. That, ladies and gentlemen, is strength.
From January 1st till April 20th, 19th, 12 Black women have died in the hands of murder, at the hands of someone they loved. If you look at it, that's about one person every 10 days. In fact, over 50% of African American women murdered are killed by a current or former intimate partner. Let me just say what I tried to say earlier, which is their names. Ashanti Allen, killed by the father of her unborn child. Victoria Alexander, murdered by her estranged husband, who gunned her down at her workplace. Raven Edwards, murdered by her ex-boyfriend in D.C. Tanoa Stokes, weeks away from graduation. Gladys Johnson, murdered by her partner in her own home. Denisha Heller, murdered by Octavius Powell. Gabrielle Ayers. Dr. Serena Fairfax, 49 years old. Nancy Matea Bowen, murdered by her husband. Amani Smith, former Broadway child star who played Nala in The Lion King, stabbed by her boyfriend. Bianca Huntley, murdered while driving home from work. These women will be remembered but will never reach the pinnacle of what God had for them because their lives were cut short by someone who saw no value in their life yet claimed to love them. I need us to understand that love cannot just be something we talk about. It should be something that is demonstrated.
That's sad right there. We need accountability. We need protection for Black women. We need spaces where Black men can confront pain before pain turns dangerous. We need to stop romanticizing jealousy. We need to stop ignoring warning signs. We believe women. We check on our friends. We have the uncomfortable conversations. And we stop treating Black women's safety as optional. It is very, very, very urgent. That's sad, y'all. That's sad. Mm, mm, mm. In closing, this episode isn't about excusing harm, and it isn't about blaming Black men. It's about telling a fuller truth. Black women deserve safety. Black men deserve healing, and our communities deserve both because love should never be lethal and pain should never go untreated until it destroys. I'm Mike Walker. Thank you for tuning in. And in the meantime, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and let's keep having the hard conversations. Be blessed.